Hey there! In today's video, we are going to be covering, can we as a for-profit get grant funding? It's a question we get asked a lot here at Learn Grant Writing, so we're going to run through expectations, like if your for-profit could potentially get grant funding or not, some strategies to consider to open more doors. What else did I want to cover? Partnership agreement, what to expect if you were to hire a grant writer to help you out, and some other resources that we suggest you learn about. So with that, let's hit it. Expectation management. So grants are typically for nonprofits, meaning the nonprofits you know of, right? Like they're doing the good work in your community, but also tribal governments, municipal governments, like a local and city, like a local government, even state government. And then sometimes you will, and then some quasi-public organizations. So maybe like a port district or a business association, etc. For-profits are typically not considered eligible because our profits should be paying for investments in the program or what you're trying to accomplish. There are some exceptions. Some for-profits are eligible, and they typically fall in the category of being their innovations would have a big benefit to the community, so and have high risk to bring to commercialization. So think about things like research companies doing medical bio research, or really super innovative energy tech companies, right? These are businesses that have high capital costs to do their research and development, and if they succeed, America's economy, or wherever nation you're in, succeeds because you have these innovations that become these economic engines. So they, as these scrappy little for-profits, are often eligible for some larger federal grant funding. Is there for-profit funding to get your kid to renovate your house? I mean, there actually is some grant funding that can go directly to that, but it's rare. But the whole point is, not every for-profit business, actually quite rarely, is there like a direct fit for you to get a grant, right? And so let's just be realistic about that there might be other things that you need to be considering, and grant funding is not one of them. So unless you're doing something exceptionally innovative that has broad benefit, it's going to serve a ton of people, then the answer might be no. But here are some caveats and some strategies that you can consider. Number one, fiscal sponsorship. So link below a blog post on this topic, but essentially a fiscal sponsor is you identifying a strategic partner that could be the conduit for grant funding, that can receive funding, administer it, manage it, technically use their 501c3 designation to get the grant funding, and then it is passed through or spent on the things that you are then running and managing. I'll give you an example. I worked with a group of artists that had a very specific project in mind that they wanted to do. It was going to be about a 10-year effort, and they did not need to go start another nonprofit, but they definitely weren't like any other entity. They weren't really for profit, but they weren't a legal entity. They were just literally a group of artists. So they went and found a fitting partner that provides fiscal sponsorship as a fee for 10% of all funding that they hold. So for example, this artist group got $50,000. All of that was managed by this community foundation, and they kept 10% of that for providing administration, tracking all of the receipts, doing the paying out of expenses, etc. Right? So like very, very, very worth it. Plus that third-party accountability really goes a long way when you're working with funders. So this can be an option. There are certain organizations in your community, typically community foundations, that provide fiscal sponsorship as a service. It actually becomes a revenue stream for them as well, because they can be efficient in how they manage and like have a full-time bookkeeper, for example, that you couldn't afford. And then they can have, 8 different sub-organizations underneath them, using them as a fiscal sponsor. So that is one opportunity. If you see that that makes sense, there could be another organization that could be your sponsor. Number 2, closely aligned, are partnerships. So I'll give you an example where, so for example, we just did a project with a 501c3 nonprofit that works with a law of for-profit businesses roll up into them. They're a business accelerator, and they want to do a big project that's going to require them having some physical space, and they were going to use that from but that land is actually on city land. So there's a lot of complexity here. We have these for-profit businesses that would use this space, trying to pursue federal funding, etc. But by the nonprofit and the for-profit signing a memorandum of agreement to work together, and who did what, breaking out all the expectations, they were able to pursue and secure some grant funding for their project by partnering, like by working together. They made that funding accessible. Third option is grant writing as a service. So let's say you are, this is a student, actually this is an example from our program. She has this really innovative technology, biotechnology, that uses fungi to basically eat dirty soil and consume like the diesel particulates, and it's way cheaper than like shipping it to somewhere, other treatment options for cleaning dirty soil. But most organizations still can't just afford these remediation services out of pocket, right? So she developed grant writing as a skill in her repertoire, so she could work with these tribal communities and local communities to help them get cleanup grant funding and other kind of innovative grants that then could pay her company to do the work. So do you see the triangle here? She helped them figure out, well, what grant funding can we help them get so they can hire us, right? And they didn't receive the grant funding directly. It went to the client, went to the organization. So there's a lot of things you have to be careful about in there to make sure that it's still a competitive process, etc., depending on if you're pursuing federal grants or not. But nonetheless, deploying grant writing as a service can be a really nice way to bring your solution, but also bring grant writing to help them with that part so they can hire you and they can get your help, right? Okay, so those are the strategies that you can consider if you are a for-profit. One other example I wanted to add. So my cousin actually reached out. She's running a really cool for-profit business that's helping, it's like an in-home care business for people that are like have mental health disabilities, and they don't need like full-on care, but they definitely need something still in the home. And she found that they really need a van so that they can get around and pick people up and take care of them, take them where they need to go. And this is a pretty common need by organizations, like how do we transport our people? And so some of the ideas for her to consider, she is find a fiscal sponsor that can buy the van, and you can own in partnership, right? So could you own a van, splitting the cost of keeping that sucker going every year with another organization that could also use it, that has like maybe needs it during different hours, right? So that's one option. And then because of the unusual circumstances related to COVID-19, there actually are more grants available for for-profit businesses now than we've ever usually seen before. So there is a possibility she could leverage some of those local, very localized grants to be able to help subsidize the cost for getting a van. The biggest thing would be able to show, like, yes, we definitely have the revenue to cover the costs for keeping that car or that van in tip-top shape, but that's a possibility as well. But the biggest thing would just be thinking about who else can you partner with so that you can basically get the grant funding to go to a nonprofit, because that's where you're going to open up a whole lot more grant opportunities that you can pursue. So that segues into, if you're going to go this route, it's really critical to establish a partnership agreement, and this is just good business anyway, right? So for example, I was involved with a women's mountain bike festival, and we needed a fiscal sponsor partner as well that could manage our funding from organizing this festival. And so we hammered out in just a casual two-page memo, basically, this is what you guys are doing, this is what we are doing, these are our point of contacts, this is the expectation, signed by both parties, right? So it just lays out the expectations from the beginning, so there are no confusion about it later on, right? Like, just outline who's doing what. That's a really important strategy. This is also common for things like friends of groups. So if, for instance, you're friends of the Rockefeller skate park group, or friends of the Rockefeller skate park, and maybe they're constantly kind of raising funds and doing what they can to keep that skate park in good shape, they might have a partnership agreement, but they're not actually like a formed nonprofit or anything, they're just a group of volunteers. They might have a partnership agreement with the municipal government there, and they hammer out their details. So and to tie this back to for-profit, you know, maybe that's like the local skate shop actually has the agreement with, like, though this is the role that we'll play, but grant funding would come to the town and then to us to help do the dirt work or whatever, right? Okay, so if you find yourself thinking, yeah, I think we fit this, we have opportunities, I think we actually could do this, what if we don't want to develop grant writing as a skill within our own in-house team? That is an option too. Get trained yourself in-house so you can do this. But B, you could hire a grant writer. So one of the most common questions we get is, well, do you pay them a % of the grant? No. That was an old school methodology, no longer considered ethical. Now, you would agree upon a fixed fee or an hourly rate at the beginning of the project with a grant writer, pay them that, and then like they do the work, right? And then boom, you're off and running. The reason that we do this way is that it's fair to everyone involved. B, it means you don't get to use grant funding to pay for a grant writer, and that's why it's very important to find a good grant writer, someone that you trust, someone you believe in, which is why we believe in doing a funding strategy first, because it's a smaller scope of work. You can build your relationship and rapport with someone and make sure they're really good and you love working with them before you commit to the grant writing phase. And if you're curious about that, there's more videos about it later. So just recognize, if you do want to hire a grant writer, you pay for the fee up front. You do not give them a % of the grant, and being prepared to actually pay for that professional service if you expect to hire a grant writer, because it's hard work and they don't do it for free. Okay, other resources. If this is not seeming like it's necessarily a good fit for you, it's important for you to double down on just the business model that you have and making sure that, well, are there changes you can make so that you are more profitable? And one of the resources that we really love is called the Business Model Canvas. It's a one-page business plan, super easy. It just actually, it's an iterative process. You can see your whole business on one page. And what's nice about it is that you can continually update it as you go. There's a lot of great resources online that you can go learn from, but that's something to consider so that you, you're actually, building a business that can pay for potentially what you are looking to get funded anyway. Also, there are often small business development centers that are attached to your colleges or whatever, they're in your community, and those can be a great resource as well for getting some free business advice so that you can grow and get whatever it is that you want to get grant funded taken care of. So with that, if you have any other questions, please post those in the comments below. It's just a common question that we get, and I wanted to cover it because for some of you, this is totally a viable option. You really can get some grant funding to your organization. For some of you, this is a bad fit. You got to focus somewhere else. So hopefully that helps you figure out which group you belong in. And with that, have a great day.